The rain fell relentlessly that night, as though the heavens were trying to wash the small town of Elmwood off the map. In the midst of the storm, a faded circus flyer clung stubbornly to a lamppost, its colors dulled by the elements, but still striking enough to catch the occasional glance. "The magnificent jester returns," the flyer declared in bold, jagged letters, accompanied by the eerie grin of a painted clown face. Beneath the image, the date of the performance was long past. Yet, as the storm grew fiercer, those who dared to look closer would swear the clown's eyes seemed to shift, following their movements. Emma, a journalism student at Elmwood College, had always been curious about local legends. One such tale was that of Grins, the murderous clown said to haunt the abandoned Elmwood Carnival grounds. According to town folklore, Grins had once been a beloved performer until a tragic fire consumed the carnival, leaving dozens dead, including him. Some whispered that his spirit lingered, seeking revenge on anyone foolish enough to trespass. For years, Emma dismissed the story as a harmless ghost tale meant to scare children, but after a string of recent disappearances near the carnival grounds, she decided it was worth investigating. She convinced her friends, Tyler, Mia, and Jake, to accompany her, armed with flashlights and recording equipment. "It's just an old fairground," Tyler said, though his voice trembled slightly. "We'll poke around, get some footage, and be out before midnight." "Unless we meet Grins," Mia joked, flashing a mischievous smile. "Please," Emma replied, "there's no such thing as ghosts. Let's just focus on finding something interesting for my article." The carnival ruins were more decrepit than Emma had imagined. Rusted rides creaked in the wind, and the tattered remains of striped tents flapped like ghostly banners. The air was heavy with the scent of mildew and decay. "Why would anyone come here willingly?" Jake muttered, shining his flashlight on a row of shattered funhouse mirrors. As the group ventured deeper, they stumbled upon the centerpiece of the carnival, a grand carousel, its horses frozen mid-gallop. The chipped paint and broken lights gave it an air of sadness, but something about the stillness felt unnatural. "Over there," Emma said, pointing to a nearby structure. It was the big top, or what was left of it. The faded stripes and sagging roof made it seem more like a mausoleum than a place of laughter. Inside, the air was colder, and their footsteps echoed ominously. In the center of the ring stood a single wooden chair. On it sat a clown's mask, grotesque in its simplicity. A red nose, exaggerated smile, and hollow eyes that seemed to pierce the darkness. "That's creepy," Mia whispered, inching closer. Before anyone could stop her, she reached out and touched the mask. The lights in the tent flickered violently, and a low guttural laugh echoed through the air. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, spinning around. "It's probably just the wind," Tyler said, though his pale face betrayed his fear. The laughter grew louder, more menacing, until it seemed to come from all directions. The group huddled together, their flashlights darting across the shadows. "Let's get out of here," Emma said, her voice shaking. As they turned to leave, the entrance to the tent slammed shut, and the laugh turned into a blood-curdling scream. The scream was unlike anything they had ever heard, inhuman, guttural, and full of malice. It vibrated through their bones, sending an icy wave of terror coursing through them. The flashlight beams flickered and dimmed as though the air itself had grown heavier. Emma yanked at the flap of the tent, but it wouldn't budge. "Help me!" she cried, panic rising in her throat. Tyler and Jake ran to her side, pulling at the fabric with all their strength, but it was as if an unseen force had sewn the entrance shut. Meanwhile, Mia stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the wooden chair in the center of the tent. The mask was gone. "Where is it?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm outside. Her question was answered by the soft creak of the carousel in the distance, its haunting tune drifting into the tent. Emma's flashlight flickered back to life, and in its beam, they saw something that froze their blood. A figure standing in the shadows, tall and hunched, with wild tufts of red hair and a tattered suit. Its painted grin stretched impossibly wide, and its eyes gleamed with a murderous light. Grins had returned. "Run!" Emma screamed, her voice snapping the others out of their paralysis. The group bolted, their footsteps pounding against the damp ground as they fled the tent. Behind them, the sound of heavy, shuffling footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the erratic jingling of bells. They sprinted through the carnival ruins, weaving between rusted rides and decaying booths. Mia tripped over a loose plank and fell hard, scraping her hands on the gravel. Jake stopped to help her up, but the moment he turned, he saw Grins emerging from the shadows, his grotesque smile illuminated by a flash of lightning. "Go!" Jake shouted, pulling Mia to her feet and pushing her ahead. "Don't stop!" The group scrambled into the funhouse, slamming the door shut behind them. Inside, the warped mirrors distorted their reflections into grotesque shapes. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they leaned against the walls, trying to gather their thoughts. "Did you see his face?" Mia whimpered, clutching her bleeding hands. "He's real. The stories are real." Emma tried to steady herself, her mind racing. "We need to find another way out. If we stay here, he'll find us." As if in response, the lights in the funhouse flickered on, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. The distorted mirrors reflected not just the group, but something else, a shadowy figure moving among them. "He's here," Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. The mirrors began to crack one by one, the sound echoing like gunshots. Suddenly, Grins appeared in the largest mirror, his face inches from their reflections. His painted grin widened as he raised a blood-stained mallet and smashed the glass. "Scatter!" Emma yelled as shards rained down. Emma and Tyler darted down one hallway, while Mia and Jake took another. The funhouse seemed to shift around them, its corridors twisting and narrowing in impossible ways. Emma's heart pounded as she ran, her flashlight beam bouncing off the mirrored walls. "This place is a maze," Tyler muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "What if we're trapped?" "We won't be," Emma replied, though she didn't believe her own words. "We just need to keep moving." In the other corridor, Mia and Jake stumbled into a room filled with abandoned props, oversized clown shoes, deflated balloons, and dusty costumes. The air was thick with the scent of decay. "We need to find something to defend ourselves," Jake said, rummaging through the piles. He grabbed a rusted metal rod and handed Mia a wooden plank with nails jutting out of it. Their search was interrupted by the sound of soft, mocking laughter. They turned to see Grins standing in the doorway, his mallet resting on his shoulder. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the room. "Stay back!" Jake shouted, swinging the rod. Grins tilted his head as if amused, before lunging forward with shocking speed. Jake barely dodged the swing of the mallet, but the force sent him crashing into a pile of props. Mia screamed and swung her plank wildly, but it only glanced off the clown's shoulder. Grin's grin widened, and he raised his mallet again. Before he could strike, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. The sound distracted him just long enough for Jake to pull Mia to her feet, and they bolted through a side door. Meanwhile, Emma and Tyler found themselves in a hidden chamber beneath the funhouse. The walls were covered in crude drawings of clowns and circus animals, their eyes crossed out in black paint. In the center of the room stood a shrine, a collection of broken toys, melted candles, and the same grotesque clown mask from earlier. "This is his lair," Emma whispered, her stomach turning. Tyler picked up a newspaper clipping from the shrine. "Look at this," he said, showing her the headline. "Elmwood Carnival fire, dozens dead, performer missing." Beneath the headline was a photo of the clown they had seen earlier, Grins. According to the article, he had been accused of starting the fire that consumed the carnival, but his body was never found. "He's not a ghost," Emma said, her voice shaking. "He survived the fire, and now he's hunting anyone who comes here." Before Tyler could respond, the room began to shake. The walls cracked, and the laughter returned, louder and more menacing than before. The laughter grew deafening, as if the very walls of Grin's lair were mocking them. Emma grabbed Tyler's arm and pulled him toward a narrow staircase leading out of the room. "We can't stay here." As they ascended, the ground beneath them began to shift. The steps groaned and splintered, but they reached the top just as the shrine below erupted in flames. They stumbled into the open air, finding themselves in the middle of the carnival grounds. Mia and Jake burst out from another building, their clothes torn and faces pale. "Emma," Jake called, running toward her. "He's still after us. He's not human." "I know," Emma replied. "We found his lair. There's something unnatural about him. He's playing with us," Mia said, clutching the wooden plank tightly. "It's like he knows every move we make." Before anyone could respond, the carousel lit up behind them, its haunting tune filling the night. One by one, the lights on the carnival rides flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the grounds. "He's driving us towards something," Tyler muttered, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Emma's gaze fell on the Ferris wheel, its massive silhouette looming in the distance. At its base, she saw a flicker of movement, a figure waiting, motionless. "It's him," she whispered. The group moved cautiously toward the Ferris wheel, the storm intensifying around them. Thunder cracked overhead, and the wind howled through the twisted metal structures. Grins stood at the base of the ride, his painted smile glowing in the lightning flashes. His mallet rested against the ground, but his posture radiated menace. "Why are you doing this?" Emma shouted, her voice barely audible over the storm. "What do you want?" Grins tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. He didn't speak, but he raised his mallet and pointed it toward the group. "This ends now," Jake said, gripping the metal rod tightly. "We can't keep running." Grins lunged forward with terrifying speed, his laughter blending with the thunder. Jake swung the rod, but Grins caught it midair and yanked it away, sending Jake sprawling. Mia screamed and charged at the clown, slamming the plank into his chest. The nails dug into his tattered suit, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he grabbed the plank and hurled it aside, knocking Mia to the ground. Emma and Tyler rushed to help, but Grins turned on them with a feral snarl. He swung his mallet, narrowly missing Tyler's head. Emma spotted a loose cable sparking on the ground nearby. An idea sparked in her mind. "Distract him!" she yelled to Tyler. While Tyler and Jake kept Grins occupied, Emma sprinted to the cable. The metal end was frayed, electricity arcing from it like angry tendrils. She grabbed it carefully, ignoring the burning sensation as the current buzzed through her hands. "Hey, Grins!" she shouted, raising the cable. The clown turned, his grin faltering for the first time. "This is for everyone you've hurt," Emma said, driving the live wire into the puddle beneath his feet. The effect was immediate. The electricity surged through Grins, his body convulsing violently. His laughter turned into a guttural scream, and his painted smile seemed to melt away, revealing burned flesh beneath. The Ferris wheel behind him groaned and shuddered, as though the very structure was reacting to his pain. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, Grins collapsed to the ground, his mallet falling from his hand. The storm began to subside, the rides around them flickering and falling silent. For a moment, the group stood in stunned silence, staring at the motionless figure. "Is it over?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. "I think so," Emma replied, though her gut told her not to trust the stillness. They gathered their injured and made their way toward the carnival gates. The air felt lighter, as if a curse had been lifted. But as they reached the edge of the grounds, Emma glanced back. The Ferris wheel stood dark and silent, but she could have sworn she saw a pair of glowing eyes watching them from its shadows. In the days that followed, the group shared their harrowing tale with the authorities. The police investigated the carnival grounds but found no trace of Grins or the horrors they described. The shrine was gone, the mask missing, and the rides appeared as abandoned as ever. No one believed them, dismissing their story as the result of hysteria or a shared delusion. But Emma knew better. Weeks later, as she worked late in her dorm room, she noticed something on her desk. A single balloon, red and shiny, tied with a frayed ribbon. Her blood ran cold as she read the note attached. "Round 2?